We're in the home stretch.
This is the last Zoom meeting this week, I think.
Oh man, what are we gonna do with ourselves?
Sabrina, are you going to make any comments or any of the board members generally before we start?
No, I'm happy to recap the process, but I don't know when you want me to, or if you want me to do that or you to do that.
I'll do the process as I did it before, but last time we got to a point where I asked you if you had any introductory remarks, and it's up to you.
Yeah, I guess maybe I will at that point do a quick recap of our meeting last night.
I'm going to refer to that meeting. but
Okay.
You do all of, you fill in all the holes that I deliberately leave
Okay.
out.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Anna.
Good evening.
Sabrina, one of the responders in comments asked, really you, has town council determined how the Board of Selectmen or select persons is to present article amendments on the ballot? Must all be listed? In what order? If not all must be listed, how will you select which will? Are you planning to respond to that? Oh,
We discussed that last night. I'm happy to go through that again.
okay.
It was
I'll
Arnold.
leave that to you then.
Okay. So I wasn't planning on going through, like last night we read some of the things verbatim. Like I thought we could just touch on like our discussion last night, unless you think we should be doing a repeat of last night somehow. Okay.
We'll see what comments, requests we get for clarification. I will read the article in full. And I'll tell just the same as I did Monday night, and say who moved it and who seconded it, and turn it over to whoever the speaker is, and you do with it what you will. And then we'll see how, what comments we get from the voters.
Mhm.
Hi, Ken.
Hello, Bruce. How are you?
Good. You're the first up. So I will read the article as I did before. I'll note that you moved it and that Sabrina seconded it. And then I will turn it over to you to make whatever comments you want to make, just as we did on Monday night. And whether you-
Sure. And for your information, I only plan to, like make a 1 or 2 minute comment.
Okay,
And when I get to the next group of articles of mine, again, would it make sense that I put all 3 together?
I will speak to that hopefully, I have it in my notes if I remember it.
Okay. If not, I'll do it anyway.
Okay. Yeah, because it was a comment made during the week, and so I need to respond to it anyway. I have 6 o'clock. Are we all ready to go?
Mhm.
Then the
Yeah.
2020th annual meeting of the town of Hopkinton is hereby opened. Good evening. My name is Bruce Ellsworth. I am your town moderator. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for giving up your evening, maybe another evening, your second of the week, to participate in this process. I'll note for the record that this meeting is being recorded and will be available to watch on the town website. I'll also note that those of you who joined in last Monday night's meeting will hear some replication of that meeting. I have to imagine that there are some folks who are online tonight that did not attend Monday, and I think you deserve to hear, you have the right to hear what you will be seeing tomorrow morning in as much detail as possible. Before we begin, I would ask that we have a moment of silence to respect those who passed away during the last year. Thank you. Our agenda tonight, out of necessity, will be a little bit different from that which you are familiar. To begin with, I will not ask that the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem will be heard tonight. I intended to have a schedule as follows: that I would introduce the select board and the staff, that I would have some administrative comments and explain the process, that there would be some comments from the chair of the school, of the select board, and then we'd move right into the articles. Before we begin, though, I think we need to explain the issues regarding our rules of procedure. The rules that you found in your original packet were clearly different from those that we have all become accustomed to in the high school, all because of the COVID-19 virus. Since they were new, our town officials reached out to the Office of the Secretary of State and the Attorney General and requested their concurrence that our new rules were consistent with the state's requirement. Those offices approved our rules. The packet was sent out, the original packet, pursuant to instructions that you deserved a 7-day notice period before that first meeting. However, since the packet went out, there's been another change, a change that caused me to write to you again last Friday. Last week, the New Hampshire legislature developed and the governor signed House Bill 1129, which established new temporary procedures for all town meetings. Those provisions include a different method as to the treatment of amendments that you, the voters, are authorized to submit following this meeting. That new legislation directed the select board to review the amendments that you folks submitted during the week. The select board met last night in public session and did just that. Therefore, the articles tonight may vary in the wording from what were included in your packet because of the changes that they found appropriate. I remind you that no amendments may be offered tonight and no changes will be made to the articles. What you hear and see tonight is what you will vote on tomorrow. And please remember that tonight, although you may make comments and ask questions, that please identify yourself with your name and your street address. All of your comments and questions, as before, will be included in the minutes of the meeting. I will not consider any comments deemed inappropriate or offensive, or which do not properly identify the voter. I will summarize the comments that we have received this week as we go through the articles. And as a matter of fact, I'll begin by some general comments that were received that were not relevant to specific articles. I will summarize them. I again remind you that they will be available in the record. One comment, I do not support additional amendments beyond those proposed by the select board. A second comment, that there was a recommendation that we not combine Articles 5, 6, and 7 and address each article individually. I will not follow that. I think it was helpful to all to have Ken Trom explain them as a package. You will vote on them individually tomorrow, but we'll continue as we did Monday night. And then there are questions regarding how the select board presents the articles and the amended articles. And I'll let Sabrina address that as we go along. Finally, there was a last comment supporting the proposed budget and supporting selling the base building and not being in favor of SB 22. Now, to return to the agenda, let me please introduce the select board and the staff. First, Sabrina Dunlap, the chair. Ken Trom, the vice chair. Steve Whitley, Anna Wells, and Jeff Donahoe. And our administrator, Neil Cass. I will note that Carol Harless, who is our town clerk and tax collector, will be taking notes of the minutes of the meeting all evening. And before we proceed, I would again like to thank everybody who put all these plans together, that the statistics and data that resulted in the articles, the folks who arranged for the meeting, all the meetings, the budget meetings, the informational hearings, the setup for tomorrow, and a special thanks for those folks who are setting up for tomorrow, which I know includes many of you who are watching tonight. And as a matter of fact, there has been a note that if any of you are interested in helping us tomorrow afternoon to count, then please come and look for Dulcie Lapoma, and we will begin counting right after the meeting, the voting ends at 2 o'clock. And Dulcie can be reached at 496-5468. And I've probably just ruined her entire evening. Now, let me take a couple of minutes just to review the schedule for tonight and tomorrow. Packets were all mailed to you with much more detail than I'm going to get into tonight, but let me hit a couple of the highlights. The polls tomorrow will be open from 8:30 to 2. There will be no separation by alphabet as you enter the parking lot. You'll be separated as you move through the parking lot. I remind you to wear your masks, bring identification, and as you process through, a card will be given to you indicating the number of voters in the vehicle. And those cards will be passed to me along with your ballots when you reach the ballot box. There will be 4 pages on the ballot. The ballots will be available on site, or you can bring them on your own after downloading them from our website. And I remind you that a space has been delegated in the parking lot for those of you who want to take the time to fill out the ballots after you arrive. Now, back to tonight. I will introduce and read each warrant article. In the interest of time, I've asked the board to pre-assign the members who offered the motion and second I will announce who made and seconded the motion, and I will invite the motioner to speak to it. Following the presentation, I will invite comments and questions on that article. I will ask that they be limited to 3 minutes each. First-time speakers will be given priority over people who have already commented. Please do not repeat comments that others have made. And all the comments and questions, I remind you, will be included in the minutes of the meeting. And all the articles will be addressed this evening before this meeting recesses. Please remember to start by identifying yourself and your street address as we move through. The ballot, as I have said before, is now on the website and can be copied and can be submitted at the voting booth tomorrow, or you may pick up the ballots when you sign in at the high school. The first warrant article on the ballot will ask whether you approve of all the procedures that we have outlined. If that article fails to pass, then no votes for any other article will be counted, and we will develop a new set of procedures and a new schedule of meetings. If passage of that article allows us to proceed, then the results will be made available on the town website as soon as they are compiled. I'll now ask if Chair Dunlap has any comments to make, or if any other members of the board have comments.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I see a comment from one of our supervisors of the checklist just saying cards are not actually handed to voters. They're placed in your windshield. And then, Bruce, you take those and assure the number of ballots match the number on the card. So just wanted to clarify that. I wanted to say thank you to everyone. This has been an interesting sort of dynamic process, and I know everyone's doing the best they can. And thank you, Bruce, and thank you to my fellow select board members, and thank you, Neil, and all of the volunteers who are going to help make tomorrow happen. And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to just touch on our process for how we conducted our meeting last night, or.
I think that would be helpful, Sabrina.
Okay. Yeah, so just to put this into context, we have had to sort of switch horses midstream with this bill being signed into law 1129. And it didn't change things a ton, but it did change the select board's role in this whole process, where normally the moderator, well, not normally, but in these COVID times, the moderator might have been the one to review amendments and decide which ones went on the ballot. And under 1129, the select board is tasked with that duty. And so we spent quite a bit of time talking to outside counsel. We consulted with the Attorney General's office to try to come up with a process that's fair and sort of is, you know, some semblance of our traditional town meeting, because none of this is normal, obviously. And so I would just say that we did our best to come up with a way to be as impartial and fair as possible. We actually had made several amendments to our own warrant articles that we had posted back in February as a result of COVID. So we talked about some of those last night at our meeting, and then we came up with sort of a framework for looking at the comments and proposed amendments we got from the public. And I'll just touch on them quickly. We looked at, did the request or Monday's meeting identify something that we had overlooked or misapprehended? Second, we looked at whether anything had happened in the world since the warrant had posted in February, which obviously COVID was a big one. And then third, did we feel a majority of the town residents supported making a change to the article? So we didn't get a ton of comments or proposed amendments, but I would say thank you to everyone who did weigh in. We appreciate it. And we did go through every single comment that we received and every proposed amendment, and did our best to discuss them fully and do land in a place where we ultimately felt like every amendment was the best thing for the town. And just one note, unlike the school ballot, which had the original article and then several amendments below it, for us, because of HB 1129, we actually amended the article itself. So on the ballot, it is much cleaner and simpler in that the amended version of the article is what you see on the ballot. You will not see the original budget and then all the proposed amendments. It's a single option. So I just wanted to put that out there. And one other process issue, because this came up a couple times on a couple of the articles, folks had asked if we, and actually we wondered if we could table any of them, like the land use change tax, just because COVID had changed everything so much. And our outside counsel said that we could not, process wise, we could not actually table anything. So in case anyone was wondering, that was not an option for us, which is why we ended up amending a few of the articles rather than tabling them. Does anyone else, did I miss anything from our sort of big picture issues last night as we addressed all these comments and articles? Okay.
This is Ken Traum. Sabrina just mentioned that as a result of the the comments we received, we did change some of the articles last night.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, Ken. Yeah, so we will walk through both the changes that we already had talked about and in some cases landed on, as well as some new changes that were a result of people's proposed amendments and comments.
I'd also say I don't recall if you mentioned this, but that all the comments and suggested amendments that we received are available for everyone to read in full on the town website, on the town meeting page.
That's right.
Okay, then with that, I suggest we move on to the first article. And the first article, you will remember, was the election of officers back at the voting on March 10th. I will read them to you. The two positions for select board were Sabrina Dunlap and Jeff Donahoe. There was one position for the town moderator, and that was Sarah Pershino. One position for town treasurer, Kevin Davis. One position for the supervisor of the checklist, Ginny Haynes. Two positions for the budget committee, one by Rich Houston and Steve Reddy. Two positions for library trustee, Sarah Chiapetta and Jason Lacombe. One position for cemetery trustee, Gail Kimball. And one position for the trustee of the trust funds, Steve Lux. The zoning amendments, and there were a number of them, you remember, all passed by a large margin. So I suggest now that we turn to the first substantive article this evening, and that's Article 3, the bond issue for road, bridge, and culvert rehabilitation. And I will note as we begin that there were two comments. One found it unconscionable, asking for a second road bond of $2 million within 4 years of the initial bond. And the second was that they were surprised that we were proposing a 0-year solution for the schools, and at the same time, in this voters' view, proposing a 100-year solution to our road culverts. There were also recommendations for amendments, and I will leave that to the board to discuss. Article 3, shall the town raise and appropriate the sum of $1,800,000 gross budget for the planning, design, rehabilitation, and construction of existing town roads, bridges, and culverts, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $1,800,000 of bonds or notes in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, as amended, to authorize the select board to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or other aid, if any, which may be available for said project, and to comply with all laws applicable to such project, to authorize the select board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver such bonds or notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon, and the maturity and other terms thereof, and to authorize the select board to take any other action or to pass any other vote relative thereto. I'll note that the select board and the budget committee recommended this article. The motion was made by Ken Traum It was seconded by Sabrina Dunlap, and I will ask Mr. Trump to speak to the article.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll start by saying that when the town had given the select board authority 4 or 5 years ago to issue a $2.2 million bond, at that time, we indicated that we had a backlog of at least $8 million. Since that time, we have basically used up that bond. We've increased the amount we're including in the budget for trimming and paving, but we're still, based on the expertise of our Department of Public Works, we have an estimated backlog, again, of roughly $8 million on road, bridge, and culvert work. What the select board determined in these challenging times is we'd only request authority to borrow $1.8 million to address the most pressing needs. And those needs are 2 culverts for Briar Hill Road, 2 for Bound Tree, the Tyler Bridge decking, and for engineering. What we would seek to do is issue a 10-year bond. The tax impact in the first full year of payments would be 31 cents per thousand or less based on the prevailing interest rate. And in recognition of Covert, had we been making this presentation at an annual meeting in March, we would have been asking for 2.2 million, and now we're down to 1.8 million. And where you mentioned there were a couple of comments seeking, saying, why are we asking for a bond at all? And there was at least one comment on the other side saying we should be seeking a lot more. And I'll just stop with that as a quick summary and be ready to respond to any questions.
All right, then let me ask if there are any comments or questions from the participants, from the voters.
I would just say people can raise their hand by going to the participant icon on the bottom and clicking raise your hand. Or if you are on the phone, it is *9 will raise your hand.
And Bruce, I just would comment quickly, just so people know, the reason the bond is a separate ballot is because it has to be under state law, in case anyone's wondering, because it's a little odd.
Good point.
Thank you for that, Sabrina.
Do we have any commenters?
We do not. No hands are raised.
I'll give another 30 seconds since it is the first one and we're all getting acclimated to this new process. Nothing?
No hands are raised.
All right, then we will stop discussion of Article 3 and move on to Article 4, which is the adoption of official ballot referendum form of meeting. There is one comment that came to me. This is the SB2 offer. This voter was against it and asked if it would be possible to have a hybrid meeting, a face-to-face with live streaming next year. I think that's an excellent question, and we will face next year as it comes, but there may, as a result of whether we determine this has been a successful forum, it might be a great opportunity to make some improvements to next year's process. Article 4, shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 40:13, known as SB2, to allow official ballot voting on all issues before the town of Hopkinton on the second Tuesday of March? That motion was made by Rita Blanchard, and I will ask if Rita is available to comment. Apparently not.
I did not see her on.
I'm looking at Steve. Steve, last night, at the end of this of the discussion on this article, you had a series of slides that explained what SB2 was. Do I remember that correctly?
Correct.
Without making more of this in it than we need, I thought that was very helpful, and I hoped it would be helpful to the voters. Could you run that up on the screen quickly and give a quick summary of what it is so that we can sure they know what they're voting on?
Yeah, I'm looking at Neil, who is the maestro of the PowerPoint for us. But if he can put them up there, I'm happy to walk through the presentation I did real quickly.
I'm looking at it right now. I lost my Zoom screen.
Steve did not know this was coming.
Nor did Neil.
Hope everyone has their knitting. I'm doing my needlepoint.
I should probably take it up.
I know it's not as helpful with a visual, but Mr. Moderator, I can start reading the slides because I have them in hard copy here. And if Neil finds them, he can put them up. Is that
That's
okay?
fine with me, yes.
So Article 4 asks for a change in our town meeting form of government to what's called SB2. That basically means that, I think it starts at slide 13, Neil.
Thank you.
You just passed it. So that basically means that if it was adopted and it requires a 3/5 vote to pass, then our town meeting would be governed by RSA 40:13, and we'd be known as what's called an official ballot referendum community. So if you go to the next slide, so what does it mean? It means that town meeting is split into 2 separate sessions. Unlike what we're doing now, those sessions are about 5 weeks apart, and that's required by state law. The first session is the more traditional, the one that people would probably recognize. It's like what we typically do now for town meeting. So there's explanation, discussion, and then amendments to the various articles. And then you vote on those amendments. The big difference being you don't vote on you don't cast a final vote on any of the articles until that second session 5 weeks later. And when you show up for that second session, you see the articles as they were amended at the first session, and you're left with a yes or no choice on the articles as they were amended. Go to the next slide, Neil. So how does this compare to our traditional town meeting? I'm going to skip some of these because this is a bit repetitive. Voting is by ballot at the second session. At that second session, there's no ability to ask questions or to move for further amendments. You can use absentee ballots at that second session. If the operating budget doesn't pass, then it's likely that we'd be going with what's called the default budget. Go to the next slide, Neil. So the default budget is defined by that law I mentioned, and it's the previous year's budget plus or minus debt service, contracts, other obligations previously incurred, and then reduced by one-time expenses and salaries and benefits for eliminated positions. The select board does that calculation as the governing body. It is possible to have several years in a row of default budget if the operating budget fails in successive years. If the operating budget does fail, the default budget is not automatically in operation. The select board, us, we can actually choose to call a special town meeting, which would have another deliberative session and then another voting session, only on the operating budget. So we could either go with the default budget or call a special meeting to do the whole thing over again. Flip, Neil, please. So the select board was unanimously opposed to the switch to SB2. The state law requires us to hold a public hearing. We did so in February, I believe, maybe March, I forget. But we did hold a public hearing. We took comments. Rita was present for that public hearing and presented her petition. And this slide really kind of lays out the reasons why we as a board voted against it. And I'll just tick through these pretty quickly. First of all, low voter participation. There's a lot of data across the state, and anecdotally, I think we've all heard from other communities that have gone to SB2, and the voter turnout for that deliberative session is extremely low, like about 1% in some communities of the voting residents. And so it's a good bit lower than what Hopkinton typically turns out for our traditional town meeting. The SB2 is not, we didn't think it was the kind of the democratic process that we all kind of think of as town meeting. With that low turnout at the first session and then the 5-week break between when you go to that and then you vote, the concern is that the people that do show up to vote are far less informed than what they are now, because a lot of people skip that first session and then, you know, are not interested in learning what happened, and they just show up at the voting session and vote yes or no. Because of the way it's broken up, it is possible for a small group of voters to show up at that deliberative session and make very significant amendments to the warrant articles. And because of the way it works, when it gets to the voting session and everybody else shows up to vote, they are stuck with that yes or no choice on something they really may not agree with or understand. The select board also had some concerns about the default budget. It is possible for your default budget to be a higher dollar amount than the proposed operating budget. And so if people vote down the operating budget, you could be looking at a bigger tax impact from the default budget. You know, when the petition was proposed at the time, and then actually on Monday night as well, you know, we heard a lot of comments about the switch to SB2 and how it would be much better for those in the community that need or that have access issues, like the elderly or those with disabilities. You know, those concerns obviously don't go away for the deliberative session. They're still there for that part of the SB2 process. And I remember that when we did the public hearing, or maybe one of the other public meetings we had where we discussed this, and certainly on Monday night, I hope the message was clear that, you know, if there are concerns about access, you know, I'm pretty sure I speak for the board and the administration, you know, please let us know what those are, because hopefully we can make an accommodation for you so that you can come to the meeting and participate and not have to miss it. But we don't know if that's possible if you don't reach out to us and tell us what you need. So please do that. And there were also some concerns about when town meeting is held right now, when we do that. You know, it's typically a Saturday. And some commenters said it was very hard for them to make that Saturday, and so they missed out on the entire process. You know, the select board sets when the business session of our traditional town meeting takes place. And so if people don't like the way that it's scheduled then, I would ask that instead of voting for SB2, that you come talk to us and, maybe there's a better date and time to do it. But that is something that's up to the select board. And, if people come forward with suggestions, we will consider them. I think that's pretty much it. I just want to touch, Mr. Moderator, on the comment that we got. The comment did say that they really liked the kind of hybrid Zoom format and asked if we could do that going forward. I believe on Monday, our town council said that it was not clear whether that's something that we could continue to do if it's not in COVID times. So, I don't want to tell people that, yeah, we can definitely do that, because I don't think we know the answer to that. I can tell you that, we do recognize that there's a segment of the population that cannot or chooses not to make the traditional town meeting. And we will look into live streaming it, even if it's only for people to keep tabs on what's going on. And if something really important to them is happening, hopefully they can drive to the high school and cast a vote on whatever that issue is. So I think I've hit on all the slides and also the comments, Mr. Moderator. If I missed something or there's something else you want me to speak to, just let me know.
Nope, thank you very much. And let me ask if Rita has come on the line.
I do not see her.
And apparently not. So let me ask if there are any others out there who would like to speak either for or against the article.
Bob Lepre has raised his hand.
Mr. Lepre.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Moderator and board. On Monday night, we were talking about this SB2, and I initially said that after many, many years of opposing it, is to just vote no kind of law. I'm also seeing that because of the inability of a lot of people to be able to actually attend meetings in the normal fashion, what we've been doing here with this hybrid setup, I think is a better model than SB2. I think SB2 is a heavy-handed, very inflexible kind of bill law. And Steve, you're absolutely right. Small groups can actually, kind of hijack the process, because you don't have the back and forth over the immediacy of voting. So I think what we should do, first of all, I now do oppose SB2 like I always have, listening to the arguments and that sort of thing. But I'm also thinking this is an opportunity for us to consider how we can make our meetings more accessible, particularly in light of what we've been able to do with this kind of technology. This is just the beginning of that. So my sense is that maybe that's something we should do and encourage and try to get the legislature to acknowledge that the technology has made it so we can do things differently. It's not to come in and sit down, because the traditional ones, if you're there, you can vote. And so we might be able to expand, and I would really like to see that. So thank you again, and we'll see what we can do next year. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any others who would like to comment?
Dennis Goddard has raised his hand.
Mr. Goddard.
Hello, Dennis Goddard on Pentecost.
Yeah, I wonder though.
Dennis, raise your hand again, and
Okay, good. It looked like Bob was still on there. Just wanted to flag that.
they moved when I was.
Can we get him back?
Here he comes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Back now.
Sorry, Dennis, that was my fault.
No problem. I just wanted to echo what Bob had said just before me, that this hybrid model is working well, and it would be nice to use the technology going forward. It certainly makes it much more democratic. A lot of us can connect to more easily this way. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other commenters?
Judy C.
Judy?
Yes, good evening. Thanks. Judy Case, 1030 Briar Hill Road. I am speaking in favor of SB2. While statistics and percentages should be looked at for other towns, we know that Hopkinton is a unique town. And I think we've seen over the majority of this year that meeting together, meeting in groups, meeting in public with social distancing, flyers, signs, all of these various mechanisms to share opinions and ideas have actually served well this community to get information out. While the structure of SB2 may be a meeting and then wait a while for the follow-up meeting and vote, the interim period offers the same type of information exchange that we have been carrying on throughout the majority of this year. And again, as I mentioned the other night on our first town meeting, public discourse in groups and in homes is something that this country was founded on. It's the way we got information out to one another. The town meeting was simply the format where you were warranted to show up, to discuss, and everybody wanted to get it done in one day to get back to their farms and their businesses. With the meeting spaced out and a vote being able to follow at a later date where public discourse and sharing of ideas has already happened and people have had the time to give thoughtful input and thought to how they would like to vote. I really see that this is a marriage of what we've been doing all along this year. And also I think that it's in keeping with the tradition of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other comments, Neil?
Janet Ward.
Janet?
Hi. First of all, thank you all for putting together this very fine town meeting under these extraordinary circumstances. I am opposed to this motion, Article 4, because it is very important to have time to deliberate. But information about the issues that come up at town meeting circulate before town meeting. So citizens have an opportunity to discuss the issues. And then when we go to town meeting all together, we have an opportunity to make clear what we feel about it. And then our fellow citizens can fill in the gaps in our knowledge or point out things that we might not be aware of. And rather than get together for a deliberative meeting and then have 5 weeks where we may get information that is not accurate, and certainly a lot of that information won't be happening in a public forum, then a lot of opinions can be swayed by information, which if it were presented at town meeting, our fellow citizens could say, wait a minute, that isn't quite accurate. Here is information you need to make a wise decision on this issue. So I think it's very, very important that town meeting remain as it is, that we reason together, and the back and forth that happens at town meeting is timely and essential. So I think SB2 is a very dangerous and unnecessary idea. I think what Steve has said about inviting people who have access issues to contact the board, and maybe we can take another look at the scheduling, the timing. So there are other ways to address the issues of concern. But as Steve pointed out, at the deliberative session, you have those same access issues that you have with town meeting. So it isn't, a magic remedy. Our town meeting has served us very well for a very long time. And I would hope that this article will be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Ann Shahade.
Hi, Ann Shahade, 280 Rollins Road. I wanted to say that I 100% support what Janet Ward just said. And I think my concern is similar to hers, that even if you meet in small groups, the quality of the information that's being exchanged is not held to the same rigor as when people get up in front of their fellow citizens in town meeting and feel accountable for portraying things correctly. I think a lot of communication happens over social media, which is heavily opinion-based and not so much fact-based. And I worry that the conversations that other people have talked about townspeople having with each other are echo chambers of conversations with people who feel similarly. And I think that there is tremendous value in being together under one roof and having the facts, the accountability, the opposing sides, and forcing people to listen to an alternative viewpoint, where with SB2, you do not need to do so. And I think that our society is already divisive and polarized enough, and that town meeting is one of the few times where we can gather as an entire community together and feel as one and listen to each other with respect. And so I am very much opposed to SB2 and just wanted to make that known. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
No other hands raised at this time.
Then I will close discussions of Article 4 and I will turn to Article 5. And as I indicated earlier, we will combine for discussion purposes tonight the Articles 5, 6, and 7. With that in mind, before I read them, I will note that there was a comment on there were no comments to me on Article 5. There was a couple on Article 6, and the question, should the town vote against selling the Bates Building, would the $12,500 listed for town hall reservations still be needed? And I think I remember there was a discussion about that last night in the selectmen's meeting. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, you do, Bruce. And the answer was,
I won't ask you to do it now. I just want to be sure that it's on the table somewhere.
sure thing.
And there was another one, a question about the library and the work done after the lightning strike, whether or not that was covered by insurance. That was discussed last Monday night, but I would ask you to consider what the proper response would be. The comment said, I believe that these items should have been included in work done after the lightning strike fire, whether or not they were covered by insurance recovery. There were generous contributions from citizens toward costs at that time. Quite possibly contributors would have kicked in another $20,000. If so, there would have been no tax burden. Please have the board address this article with specificity. So I'll leave that to you when we, in the discussion. And finally, in Article 7, a question about whether or not there was a routine maintenance plan at the library, which might, I suspect, have negated the need for this specific investment on the staining and the work that's now being proposed. So I'll leave that for you and ask you to remember it as we get into the discussion phase. With that, let me read the articles. Article 5 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the Budget Committee recommended sum of $7,703,736 for general municipal operations. This article does not include appropriations contained in special or individual articles addressed separately. Article 6 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $819,000 to be added to previously established capital reserve funds. There is a list, and I'll leave it to Mr. Trom to get into more specificity on the list. And finally, Article 7 was an appropriation to expend trust funds to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $71,500 to be added to previously established expendable trust funds. Again, there is a list, and I'll leave it to Mr. Trom. I will note that all the motions to each of the three were made by Mr. Trom. Each was seconded by Ms. Dunlap, and Mr. Trom will speak to the three articles. Ken.
Thank you, Bruce. And as Bruce mentioned, I'll be taking Articles 5, 6, and 7 together And those articles are the ones that in effect are used to develop the tax rate for the year. And just to jump to the bottom line, what the select board is proposing now is a 0% increase in the tax rate or a level tax rate. And that compares with a 7.87% increase, which we were planning to propose had the town meeting been held as normal in March. So with that, Article 5 is for the operating budget of $7,520,656, which is a reduction of $183,000 from what you would have seen had we had our regular town meeting in March. Article 6 is for a sum of $676,500, the capital reserve funds. And again, had we had our regular town meeting in March, that number would have been $142,500 higher. And the final Article 7 is for $71,500 appropriation to expendable trust funds. And that number has not changed since from what we would have proposed in March. And all three articles are unanimously supported by the select board and the budget committee. To address the questions that Bruce mentioned, the $12,500 had been relating to town hall renovations, and that has been removed as part of Article 6. So that's not there anymore. As far as the library is concerned, the library received donations after the fire from the community, I believe going to the Library Foundation, and they were raised roughly $125,000. And they spent those in their entirety on improved energy efficiency, lighting, quiet study spaces, improvement to the children's areas and soundproofing, and a cafe for community gathering and improved staff workspaces. So they did receive a good sum of money, and certainly thank everybody in the community. And they utilized it to improve a lot of the interior. What Primex, the insurer, covered were all repairs for lighting related damages. So Primex in effect paid to bring the building back to what it was prior to the strike. We do not think that ordinary maintenance is something that should be covered by donations. We think it should be something that is covered by the town. And as far as the issue of unexpendable trust funds, there's 41,000 going for library buildings and grounds. The bulk of that is going for restaining the exterior of the building. And that is something that over the last few years was being looked at and considered within expendable trust funds and under routine maintenance. It didn't really come to the surface as a pressing need until 1998. And at that time, the contractor had suggested that it should be addressed. But then the issues with the fire took place. And at this point, the library has received 3 bids to do the staining work, and they do have a local contractor lined up to do the work. And we felt it was appropriate that that's something that needs to be done and should be done and should be paid for by the town. So I believe that covered the items that were commented on by the public and by you, Bruce. So I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Neil, do we have any
Yes.
questions?
William Hill.
Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Ellsworth, and board members for doing this meeting. My address is 169 Old Henniker Road. In reference to Article 6, can you give us the totals on each one of those funds? Since we're adding to a reserve fund, it would be nice to know what the total in those reserves currently are.
Here, if you could give me a moment.
Thank you.
Do you have it, Ken?
I want to make sure I have the most recent. As of the end of 2019, the ambulance capital reserve fund was 25,431, and we're proposing adding 75,000 to that. What we're building towards is in 2023, we feel we're going to have to replace our second ambulance, and that'll cost roughly $333,000. Is that the kind of detail you're looking into, sir?
Yes, yes. Given that we had such a hard time with the school budget, and people are having hard times in general these days with COVID-19 and being out of work, I wondered if it was appropriate for us to be raising this kind of money if our reserves aren't completely depleted, and maybe deferring these kind of costs till next year.
If I can address that, we did look at, okay, if this total recommendation was approved, what would that mean for next year? And it would tell us that we're potentially $500,000 short of what we're going to have to raise next year. So in part, this is, even though this is zero, if we reduced it further, we'd be looking at a much larger jump next year, if that helps.
Well, I guess again, I would like to see the detail, on the radios, the highway department. What are we building up to, and what have we got in our reserves right now?
Sure. If you look at your town report, if you have one, it is all published in there. On page 162 are all the capital reserve balances. And in this capital improvement plan is all the plan that's been put together for those purchases. And that is on.
Can I find that online somewhere?
You can. Yes. If you go under the town meeting section, the town report is there. The CIP report, the numbers begin on page 66.
Okay, thank you.
And although it will be after the fact, I will note that tomorrow morning during voting, those town reports will be available on site. Is that right, Neil?
That's correct.
So that level of detail, again, after the fact, will be available for study.
Okay, thank you. And I one follow-up question, like we did with the school board, is there going to be walk-up voting as well as drive-up?
Yes,
Great, thank you.
you don't have to go out and buy a car in order to vote.
Thank you, Bruce. I figured I could borrow one of yours. I'll take the
Other
Healy.
commenters?
You want those new registration fees, though?
Are there other commenters, Neil?
I do not see any. No other hands raised at this time.
Then we will close discussion of Articles 5, 6, and 7 and move to Article 8. Article 8 is authorization to sell the Bates Building. I do have comments. They are all against. One suggests that an alternative would be to start saving for a new town office building. Another is simply not in favor of selling it. A third is asking why the select board focuses on selling the base buildings when there are other properties around that might be considered for sale. And suggesting that there are many other uses that the town could use the base building for. The third is just do not sell the building. And the last, next to last, is asking for more financial information to make an informed decision. What's the current financial impact to the town of carrying the building? What is the expected financial impact from the sale? And finally, one voter asks if Article 8 can be tabled. By law, articles cannot be tabled. They must be acted upon once they are in the warrant. But the other questions I'll leave for you folks after I read the article. Shall the town authorize the select board to sell the base building, former base library, at 846 Main Street, identified on the town tax maps at map 101, lot 85-000, with sufficient land? Further, that the select board shall be authorized to sell such lot upon such terms and conditions which they deem to be in the best interest of the town and as determined by the probate court, and provided adequate accommodations can be made for the safe storage of the town archives and adequate space can be provided for the supervisors of the checklist as determined in the sole discretion of the select board in consultation with the town archives committee and the supervisors of the checklist. The motion was made by Sabrina Dunlap, was seconded by Stephen Whitley, and will be addressed by Ms. Dunlap.
Thank you, Bruce. So just to respond to a couple of those comments, I guess I'll start with the one that was suggesting there's many other properties that the town owns that we could potentially sell. We talked about this last night, and that's really not the case. So all of our town-owned properties are currently used, like the police station or the fire station, with the exception of one building that we do lease that's attached to the Kimball Cabins property that cannot be subdivided. But otherwise, unless somebody else knows of something, I just want to clarify that that suggestion isn't really accurate. And so the other question I wanted to address is the one that had several just sort of practical questions. So annual operating and other expenses, they're around $4,300 for utilities. I think I mentioned that on Monday. So that's electricity and heat and that sort of stuff. And then currently we're renting month to month under fair market value. So we're getting $400 a month currently for that building to be used. And then there's questions about the expected impact from the sale. So the building, if it was subdivided as we would want it to be, the building and the plot it's on is assessed at about $318,000. So we would expect it to sell somewhere around there. And the proceeds would most likely be split between the town library and the town hall, because that is what we floated by the Attorney General, the Charitable Trust Division, and they would be the ones sort of weighing in on how the proceeds would be distributed after the sale. Costs associated with the sale. So we'd have to subdivide it. And obviously there's costs associated with moving the archives. I think costs associated with selling the building, like subdividing and actually going through the sale, would be probably a few $1,000s of our lawyers' time to do that work. I don't think it would be anything substantial. And then getting to this question around archives. So I think this is probably the issue I've heard the most about from folks. And I think this is most concerning to me. And I think based on our discussion last night at our select board meeting, this is concerning to everyone. So we talked about previously modifying the upstairs of the town hall to accommodate archives, and said that the estimate to do that work would be about $8,300. So there have been many concerns raised around, it's not the same thing as like a fireproof vault that exists at Bates right now. And I think Jeff said this really well last night, but basically none of us want to be the person responsible for anything bad happening to the amazing records we have in the Bates building. And so I and others, which is why we amended the article, want to be very clear that this isn't the type of thing where if we were authorized to sell the building, boom, it would be on the market and sold immediately. This would merely enable us to actually pursue a sale, because otherwise our hands are really tied and we can't even enter into a lease beyond 12 months, which is why we're in this, under fair market value month-to-month lease right now. But there would be many steps that would precede a potential sale. And I know that we would not sell the Bates building if we did not have a set plan in place to deal with the archives safely. And the supervisors of the checklist. That's another concern that I've talked to some folks about, and their space. So I personally think town hall, we actually have discussed this at some of our select board meetings. And I went back and dug up some minutes from last spring. It does appear that town hall, without doing like damage to the historical integrity of the building, can accommodate the needs of the town clerk and the supervisors of the checklist. And the archives, I think, is the big one. And I asked last night, and I'm going to look into this, but I don't know what other towns do. We can't be the only town that has precious historical documents. I don't know of another town that splits their buildings like this, a town at least that's as small as Hopkinton. So I would imagine there are other historic town halls where archives are stored. So anyway, we ended up arriving at the amended language in the amendment, adding the provision about safely storing the archives and making sure that the supervisors of the checklists are part of that, as well as the archives committee. So that's a change to this that we made last night. And am I missing anything big from our discussion last night? Anyone want to add anything? Anyway, so I'll just wrap up my little spiel here with saying that the reason we made the changes to the article is because, we all firmly believe we would not, and we know we would not sell the building until these things were figured out. So we went ahead and put that right in the article.
Thank you. I did note that I had omitted one comment. There was a suggestion or question whether it was possible to build a fireproof vault somewhere in the new Hopkinton Library building. So you can add that to your list of considerations.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments from the public, Neil?
Yes, Kathleen Shuck.
Please join us. Yes.
Hello? Hi.
Hi.
We're just curious, like we've heard all the sides in terms of what to do with what's in the building and how to recreate space that we would still need. I guess I'm not entirely clear as to why we want to sell it in the first place. Like, what's the reasoning? What's the purpose? Why did we suddenly decide to sell this building?
Who would like to speak?
Well, thank you for the question. I guess I'll start since it's my article. I would say I wouldn't characterize it as suddenly deciding to sell. This has been a conversation that's been going on since 2018 when we had to make the move to town hall. I think for me at least, and I think several of my select board members would agree, that a lot of this is just sort of practical. I mean, the building, we're not going to be moving the town clerk back there. And so we have a building that is costing the town money to maintain. And it seems like it makes sense given the times that we're in and the amount of financial squeezing that's happening to sell a building that's in decent shape that the town could take the proceeds and split between two incredibly important parts of our town, the town library and the town hall. And also, you know, we have these found efficiencies with having everything under one roof at town hall. And so I guess my response to that, and I appreciate that that some people do sort of interpret this as happening very quickly, but I will say we have talked about this a lot, and everything's been as deliberate as we can make it. So I would just push back on the notion that this is like all unfolding very suddenly.
Thank you. Are there other commenters?
Carol Hooper.
Ms. Hooper.
Hi, it's Carol Hooper from Pennacook Road.
Oh.
Hi. So after the board made that amendment last night, I thought it would probably be helpful to get a sense of what it would cost to actually replace the vault with a fireproof facility. So I sort of did a little bit of research today. I contacted New Hampshire's state archivist and the director of the state archives, who is Brian Burford. And I asked him who it was that did these sorts of things, who would build a vault of this type to replicate what we have. And based on his suggestions, I called a firm called Firelock, which apparently has built something like 1,700 fireproof vaults of this type. And the owner of the building, first off, I asked him about our proposal as it is the $8,300 idea of putting sheetrock in a room upstairs in the town hall. And he confirmed without any question that the plans as they stand do not in any way, shape, or form create a fireproof space. And I won't go into the details, but if anybody wants to call me, I'm in the phone book, I can give you all the details on that. And this is even more true for digital media, just by the way. So I went on to ask him what it would cost to create a vault on the same size as our current vault. And he said he had a little calculator there. He was quite ready with the number. And he said that either in concrete or the material that he usually uses, it would be in the park of $50,000 to $60,000. So that would be to create basically a box, of concrete or another material, and the door and so forth. So this would be the vault only, and it would need to go somewhere. So we would either have to come up with 220 square feet on the first floor of an existing building. You cannot put these on a second floor, especially of a wood building, without a lot of other things going on first. Or we'd need to create an addition to an existing building. And so of course that would be an added expense onto the $50,000 or $60,000. Now, I'm not gonna swear up and down that this is the be all and end all of cost estimates, but I did try to do a really good job and go to somebody who seemed to know what they were doing. And I did share, sorry, Neil, I didn't have time to call you. I did share with two other members of the archive committee, Heather Mitchell and Lynn Clark, this information. And I think together, we all really feel that the voters should know that we are not looking at $8,300 to replace our current facility with another safe facility, as you asked the committee to do in that article. So I think, we should expect that the cost will be orders of magnitude larger than that number. So there are just really other things that I wanted to share really quickly. There is a NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency standard for protection of documents. That standard is 47 pages long. So this is not going to be cheap. and this is not going to be easy. One final thing, while I had Brian Burford on the phone, he confirmed with me that there are no copies of the town's earliest records, ones that are in our vault. There are no copies of those at the state archives. They have not been copied. They have not been transcribed. Those things are irreplaceable, and they are the only copies. If they go, so long. So I want to thank everybody, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil.
Ruth Chevion.
Hi,
Yes, please.
good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the board, Neil. Thank you for hearing all our concerns. I have two questions. I have one set of questions concerning the economics of this. I wanted to ask Sabrina, I think you said that you thought the town could raise $318,000. My understanding, and maybe we're looking at different numbers, but does that 318 include the land and the gazebo, or is it just the building?
No, sorry, that's just the building with the little bit of land. It would be unsubdivided apart from the gazebo and the parking lot behind it.
I have to say, I was told a wildly different figure, like $100,000 less than that, but I'm sure that you have better information than I do.
Well, it's available on the, Neil, you can go ahead and see your.
That's the assessed value, which from a year ago has certainly changed. That's strictly the assessed value.
I see. Okay. I want to ask, you mentioned about cost, just to continue on the issue of cost, that I think you said that the building was costing the town, but I think Ken said just at the first meeting that the undervalued rent that we're paying is actually covering the current cost of the building. So it's not, is that true that you're really not out a lot of money?
Sabrina, would you want me to respond?
Yeah, and I also am happy to as well.
Okay, I believe what I had indicated previously was that the rent that Ruth is paying for the upstairs of the building is roughly equal to what the utilities are on an annualized basis. We are, had it been sold and it was a private owner, we'd be getting property taxes and we wouldn't be paying utilities. So there's two ways to look at it.
Right. I certainly.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna add one other thing, Ruth, quickly, is that in any, like, we know the boiler has to be replaced soon. So any big ticket items like that certainly cost money.
Yes, I do want to, before I leave that, express my gratitude for this, for the town having rented it out for the town, and we've absolutely loved it. So I do want to thank you for that. But I want to ask you a question about the amendment. And I'm wondering about why you feel it's important to have sole discretion. And couldn't the supervisors of the checklist have some discretion? Aren't they really an important part of this process, and also the archives committee? It's hard to see why you, to me, why it's hard, why you need to make this decision completely without input from anybody, really. Sole discretion. It's very powerful language.
Stephen, I think you suggested it, but I would just say quickly, the idea is to consult with supervisors and the archives committee, but Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, Ruth. The way that it was intended, and I think the way that we all read that language, is that the board is required to consult with the archives committee and the supervisors to address these issues. But the ultimate decision is going to be made by the board. That's kind of the way. And if it doesn't read that way, I'm sorry. It's not intended to be confusing, obviously, but I just want to clarify that we meant it, and we will consult with the archives committee and the supervisors, because we realize that those two bodies have a great deal of very important input that we need to understand to make an informed decision.
Thank you, Steve. I really do understand that. However, just as we discussed about procedure for this meeting, words are words as it's written down. The decision is really up to you with nobody else to argue. And part of the reason that this concerns me is that not every comment and not every amendment and not every suggestion has been asking you not to sell the building, but the majority have. And I understand that the board still wants to sell the building. So you've consulted us as voters, but you still want to sell the building. So it's hard for me to see why, whether sole discretion is really such a great idea for us.
Well, I mean, the governing body of the town, which is us, I mean, that's just, to me, I'll speak for myself. I mean, those are the sorts of decisions that the governing body typically makes. And so because we feel that that's the sort of decision that a governing body makes, and we're responsible for kind of running the day-to-day operations of the town, we felt it should be something that stays with the board to make.
Then why does it come to town meeting at all?
Well, that's to sell. But I mean, again, we are not going to make this decision without hearing from you guys probably numerous times about how you feel about the plan and how good of a job we've done in addressing your concerns.
And then you want to get.
I think it's. Let me say one more thing, and then I'll stop, and you can comment. If I don't know what the future holds, but if the supervisors and the archives committee, if we can't address your concerns and make you guys feel comfortable with what we're going to do, I mean, I think it would be difficult for us, and I'm speaking for myself, be difficult for me, I guess, to vote in favor of selling the building over the strenuous and well-founded objections of the archive committee and the supervisors.
I'm going to interject myself here because I think we understand both sides of the issue. And Ruth, I think we understand yours clearly. And I do remind you and remind everyone that that's the very reason that this article is on the warrant. It is not up to the select board at this time to make that decision. It is your decision, you, the voters, to decide tomorrow whether to give them the authority to move forward. And if you don't believe they should have it, vote no. But if you do find logic in the proposal as it is written, vote yes. With that, yes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you.
So I also just want to remind folks that we can't table any articles. And so we felt that the best way to incorporate all the comments that we received was to add this amendment that is our attempt at addressing the concerns that we heard about the implications and ramifications of selling the building.
Good. Okay, thank you all. Neil?
Gene Lightfoot.
Gene.
Hi, everyone. Jean Lightfoot, 186 Deer Path, Kentucky. I am one of the supervisors of the checklist, and I've talked before, so I'll try to make this brief. Just in thinking over this week and seeing all the different comments and the discussions, one of the things I don't understand is why you have to have permission to sell before you try to put together a concrete plan on what is going to happen with the concerns that we have. It seems to me that you could spend a little bit of money and put together a good, serious, thoughtful plan on how to deal with the things that you're dealing with from Bates, and then come back to the town and say, look, this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is how much it's going to cost. And in order to do that, we need to sell the Bates building. I think at that point, you may have an argument for a good argument for selling the Bates building. So I'm still going to vote no on selling the Bates building because I think that we're still premature on this. The other thing I wanted to comment on was that last night, someone was talking about the second floor being acceptable perhaps for the supervisors. And I've talked to Neil about this, and he knows full well because he knows what it is and who we are. All of us are over 60, and that's probably going to continue. That there is no elevator in that building. The stairs going up there are very narrow and very steep. And we can get ourselves up there just fine. But the problem is that when we have to do an election, we bring in probably 7 or 8 carts full of the stuff that we have to use at the election and then take it back upstairs. And being on the second floor, the way it is right now, just wouldn't work for us. So that's it. Thanks for all your time. This has been great this week.
Thank you, Jean.
Tammy Clay.
Tammy.
I'm unmuting. So I've heard a lot of, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I've heard a lot about, the problems with the voter people, but the historical information, why or has it been checked into seeing if that could have, if the Historical Society has room in their basement? It is climate controlled, and I'm not sure how much space is down there, but why wouldn't you be able to build a vault down there and just pay them a small stipend to maintain a vault in their area for historical documentation?
It's a great suggestion. I appreciate that. And I also would just add on that sort of theme, there is a possibility of potentially, if we were to sell Bates, of entering into arrangement where we could continue to keep our documents where they are. So I don't think that's out of the question either, but I appreciate that. And I think it's definitely, that's a really interesting idea to pursue. So thank you.
Andrea Kate.
Hi. I just wanted, I didn't come into this feeling very strongly about Bates. I think it's a cute building. I love the art shows that they have, but I do kind of object to, it seems like there's a lot of people that seem to think it shouldn't even be considered. And I think that you, the select board, did the right thing in looking at a building that maintenance wise is eventually going to cost us money when boilers go, when roofs go, which they do. And I was also curious about the archives. How many towns have like a concrete bunker for their archives? Is that typical? I don't know much about archives, but it sounds like, I just assume you take care of them. And you also, I wanted to point out, Bruce said everything I wanted to say about it's coming up for amendments so we can all vote on it. But also the select board is elected officials. So I feel like there's an insinuation that you guys are doing things that you shouldn't be. And it seems clear to me that you're being transparent and you are just giving us the information that you have that we can vote on it. And I think that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Sarah Baruti.
Hi, thank you. Sarah Baruti, 371 Maple Street. I was going to say the same thing that the last speaker just said, that I really support the select board members really thinking about the budget in the long term and looking at ways we can really just try to reduce the financial need. Even if we do end up having to pay 50 grand for a vault, it still puts us in a profit and still prevents us from having to deal with further costs in the future. And so I just really appreciate all your work, and I do absolutely support the selling of the Bates building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily Burek.
Hi, this is Tom Burek, 1526 South Road. Looking for a clarification, there was talk earlier that the board could only enter into a month-to-month lease right now. The way this article is drafted is it only purports to authorize the sale of the building. But if this were to pass and you were to decide that you did not want to sell, would this by its language give the board the authority to enter into a long-term lease? Or would this article actually have to be amended to authorize a long-term lease?
That is a very good question. I believe it would have to be separately authorized. I'm looking to Neil and Stephen here. Yeah, so it would have to be separately authorized by the town at town meeting to allow us to enter into anything beyond 12 months or a longer term lease.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Tom.
And it's Carol Hooper again, and she's the only one with her hand raised right now.
Okay.
Hi, Carol Hooper on Pennacook Road. So I think I can answer since nobody else is going to answer it, I can answer the question about the Hopkinton Historical Society. There is no space. I mean, we are always looking, at the possibilities of expanding, where we could buy additional building, so there, I can confirm that there is not space for all of the town records that are currently in the vault. And in terms of another question, somebody asked about other towns and vaults. Yes, other towns have vaults. I mean, it's not like not like I've surveyed them, but I know of a half dozen of them. And I assume, I think most places our size or larger have them. And one point about that, the clerk is responsible for those documents, right? And she's personally responsible under the RSAs for those documents. And, if something happens to them, it's her responsibility. And so I think we have to think about that. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Candy Garvin.
Candy.
Yes, Candy Garvin, 515 Boundtree Road. Yes, I'm back. I am a supervisor of the checklist. I say this as a taxpayer first. I appreciate the select boards trying to put everything into a better budget for the town. I do appreciate that. I don't think that the sale of Bates is really going to help, because I believe that the plan to use or don't use it hasn't been figured out yet. If we're talking long-term planning, then we can't do short-term types of things. I know that you say you don't want to sell it, and I believe you, but if it comes up, it can be sold at that point, right? I agree with Jean as far as the transporting of things up and down. Yes, we could, but it would be up and down upstairs. And I don't think that is something that you truly are looking at, having us be on the second floor when that has to be refurbished also. I don't think that happens. So as a taxpayer, I think it'd be worth our while not to sell Bates for the little bit of money that you would get to try to repair the town hall and bring it up to speed. As a supervisor, I believe the town clerk, and you are all gonna just cringe. I'm watching. The town clerk and the supervisors of the checklist need to be in one building. Again, they need to be by law. That hasn't happened for a year. We go back and forth. It's not that it's all that difficult, but by law. So if you're really looking at that, the town clerk should go back to Bates until the long-term plan is figured out. The space is right. for both. We had the cemetery trustees that were moved also, or moved on their own. But I think it was a quick decision, right, Sabrina? It was a quick decision to, to move a town clerk. And then it was a long-term decision. I'm not a select board person. I disagree that it's a long-term thing, because the long-term plan isn't set yet. I'm not sure who makes those decisions. I don't think it's only the school board. I think Neil does have some skin in the game, and I appreciate that, Neil. Everything that we want for a town government being under one roof would be terrific. We just don't have an adequate roof. So please think long-term, not short-term. I do appreciate what you're doing. I do also agree with Ruth Chevian. The wording was a little bit personal, how it got, well, what if they don't meet with us? That's what I heard last night. We would always meet with you. It doesn't seem to matter what we say, but we certainly would meet with you. You are the governing body. Get it? We get it. If I wanted to do something, I would run for school board. No, thank you very much. No, thank you. I appreciate it. But please, long-term, please, long-term, vote no, people who are listening, and call your friends, and we'll work this out together. I thank you. Respectfully, me. Good night.
Thank you, Candy.
Can I respond to one thing very quickly, just to clarify? And thank you, Candy. Appreciate your comments. I don't recall somebody suggesting last night that the supervisors would be upstairs. I think we all recognize that. Oh, sorry. Well, so maybe Anna might have, but I saw Neil shaking his head no.
Yeah, that was me just trying to spitball. My husband talks about when they used to put on plays up there, and so I know that there's a big space up there. If it's not feasible, I apologize.
Right. And I would just add, I think that I think we all agree that this needs to be a longer term plan. And I will mention again, we did have a meeting last spring, 2019, where we did talk about the layout potentially to accommodate supervisors and the clerk and other things. So anyway, thank you.
Neil.
Adam Yoga or something to that effect.
Mr. Yoga.
Hello. Asa Dustin. I've been living in town my whole life. I'm happy to speak to you all. I'm simply curious because I grew up with the Bates Building and I have adored it as my childhood library, and think town art space is with the utmost righteousness. I'm just curious, where was the outrage when we started talking about dissolving the libraries during the day and our school buildings and cutting art classes? Because if it's art and libraries that we're worried about, where was the outrage when we're talking about our schools? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Neil?
No one else has their hand raised.
Then if there are no other comments, I will close discussion of Article 8 and turn to Article 9. Article 9 reads, shall the town modify the previously adopted provisions of RSA 72:39A for elderly exemption from property tax in the town of Hopkinton based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers to be as follows. For a person 65 to 74 years of age, $120,000. For a person 75 to 79 years of age, $145,000. For a person 80 years of age or older, $170,000. To qualify, the person must have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 3 consecutive years own the real estate individually or jointly, or if the real estate is owned by such person's spouse, they must have been married to each other for at least 5 consecutive years. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $50,000, or if married, a combined net income of not more than $60,000, and own net assets not in excess of $150,000, excluding the value of the person's residence. That motion was made by Anna Wells, seconded by Jeff Donahoe, and Ms. Wells will speak to the article.
Sure, thank you. There's not much to say, and I think I will address just briefly 9, 10, and 11, just briefly together, just to say that these are either introducing new exemptions or credits or expanding exemptions or credits for the town. So, you know, we did talk about them at more length on Monday. We received no comments, no public comments or suggested amendments regarding them. They are unanimously supported by the select board. So apologies for jumping into 9, 10, and 11 altogether, but in the interest of expediency, I would do that.
I'm going to ask if there are any comments regarding Article 9 from the public.
William Hill.
Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you. Have you got any impact as to what this is going to do to our tax rate?
Yes, so we discussed this on Monday. Sorry again, Neil, if you have the slides. I believe the difference in, thank you, in revenue is $142,000 for Article 9.
Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, I guess if you're going to try to roll them all together, could you give me the impact on the rest of them? I'm sorry, I missed the meeting.
Sure, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But
He's not going to put them all together. I will offer them separately so that you can comment on each one.
Thank you.
Do you have further questions on
All right.
9, Bill?
No, thank you.
Okay. Neil, do we have other commenters?
We do not.
Then I will close the discussion on Article 9, and I will move on to Article 10 so that people can have a chance to speak. It's the adoption of disabled exemption. Shall the town adopt the provisions of RSA 72:37B, exemption for the disabled from property tax, based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers to be $100,000. To qualify, the person must be eligible under Title II or Title 16 of the Federal Social Security Act for benefits to be disabled, have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 5 years, and own the real estate individually or jointly, or if the real estate is owned by such person's spouse, they must have been married for at least 5 consecutive years. The exemption may apply only to property that is occupied as the principal place of abode of the disabled person. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $50,000, or if married, a combined net income of not more than $60,000, and own net assets not in excess of $150,000, excluding the value of the person's residence. It's on the table, and you have no other further comments?
Just to say, this is a new exemption that would be offered rather than expanding an existing exemption.
All right. With that, Neil, do we have any commenters?
Yes. William Hill.
Mr. Hill.
Same question as before, and I do want to make it known that I support these amendments, but I think it's important that everybody have an idea of what the impact is to our tax rate. So same question as before, and thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think that because this is new, Neil might have more information, but we don't know who is out there who would wanting to be included under this exemption. So I don't know if we have a very clear idea of what the impact would be. That sound right? No?
That does sound correct. Generally, when an exemption is put in place like this, though, it builds over the years and is not like when the all veterans exemption went in. It wasn't an overnight thing. It people started applying over the years. So I think that's the way it would probably happen. But we don't have any way of knowing how many people would qualify for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, are there others?
There are not.
Then I will close discussion of Article 10 and move to Article 11. Shall the town modify the previously adopted provisions of RSA 72:35 optional tax credit on residential property for a service-connected total disability by increasing the amount of the credit to $4,000? This tax credit is only available to a person who has been honorably discharged or an officer honorably separated from the military service of the United States and who has total and permanent self-connected disability, or who is a double amputee or paraplegic because of service-connected injury, or the surviving spouse of such a person. This tax credit may be applied only to property which is occupied as the principal place of abode by the disabled person or the surviving spouse. And that motion was made by Ms. Wells, seconded by Mr. Whitley. And Ms. Wells, do you have any further comments?
No, I do not.
Neil, do we have any questions?
We do not.
Okay, then I will close discussion of Article 11. We will move to Article 12, motion of a solar exemption. What did I do with it? Shall the town adopt the provisions of RSA 72:61 to 64 inclusively, which provides for an optional property tax exemption from the property's assessed value for property tax purposes for persons owning real property which is equipped with solar energy systems intended for use at the immediate site. Such property tax exemption shall be in the amount equal to 100% of the assessed value up to $10,000 of qualifying solar energy system equipment under these statutes. The motion was made by Steve Whitley, seconded by Ms. Dunlap, and Mr. Whitley, you are invited to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We got an amendment request after Monday's meeting. And last night we discussed that and all concluded that that request had merit. That request was to set the cap instead of $25,000 of assessed value, to set the cap at $10,000 of assessed value, for the simple reason that if you do kind of the back of the envelope math, the difference between those two figures could be as much as $35,000 in tax revenues. And that just seemed like a lot of money to us right now. So we agreed with Mr. Garvin, who proposed the amendment, and reduced the cap on this exemption to $10,000. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to try to address them. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Neil?
I see none.
You still see none.
Still none.
Then I will close the discussion of Article 12 and we'll move to Article 13. Article 13 is to modify the Land Use Change Act percentage allocated to Conservation Fund. Shall the town authorize 50% of the land use change tax collected pursuant to RSA 79A:25 to be deposited into the existing conservation fund in accordance with RSA 36A:5, Roman 3, as authorized by RSA 79A:25, Roman 2. If adopted, this article shall take effect April 1, 2020, and shall remain in effect until altered or rescinded by a future vote of the town meeting. It was moved by Sabrina Dunlap, seconded by Anna Wells. And Ms. Dunlap, you wish to speak?
Yes, just briefly. So we had gotten a suggestion. We had this at, well, where we are right now is 35%. We then put on the warrant article 100%. And then we had hoped to table this just because of revisiting our budget and everything that's happening in the world. And since we couldn't table it, 50% was offered as an amendment by Mark Zinkel. And I think he had actually mentioned that Monday when he called in, and it seemed like a very reasonable option since we couldn't table it. And the gap between 35% and 50% is not enough to sort of throw anything off in the budget or anything like that, but it's still an improvement than where we are. But I think probably is more appropriate than 100% given times we're in. So that's where we landed. And thank you, Mark, for your thoughtful amendment, proposed amendment.
Neil, are there any commenters?
No, yes. Bob Lepre.
Mr. Lepre?
Yeah, hi, Bob Lepre. I'll tell you where I live this time, Highland Ave in Kentucky. I'm a conservation commissioner. Just to alert the voters what we use this money for. It's quite often, if we have some money in our reserves, we can quickly take action on land acquisitions for conservation purposes. We've done it several times, and we also were able to leverage the money we have at hand for other funding sources. So the 50% is going to be a welcome increase, and appreciate the support of the board. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Bonnie Christie.
Bonnie Christie.
Bonnie Christie, 302 Smithfield Road. I just wanted to thank Mark Zinkel for bringing this amendment forward, and I appreciate the select board supporting it. There couldn't be a more important time for us to be looking at our natural resources and doing everything we can to protect them and understand what we have. The National Land Trust Alliance has said that in terms of climate change, natural solutions, which are usually things like making sure you have functioning wetlands, standing forest to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. These things are so important, and these natural solutions can be up to 21% of the overall solutions to climate change. So I really appreciate this as a compromise. It's only a 15% change. We had hoped for 100, but to me, this is what town meeting and deliberation is all about. And we came up with an idea, and somebody had a different idea, and we talked it through. And I'm also on the conservation. I very much support this, and I hope that the town will as well. And I thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Neil?
No other hands raised.
Then I will close discussion of Article 13, and we'll move to Article 14. To clarify an amendment to Hart's Corner TIF District Plan. Shall the town amend the Hart's Corner Tax Increment Finance District and Plan of 2018 as presented at public hearing on February 18th, 2020 and posted. The amendment clarifies that development may include multifamily residential development. That motion was made by Steve Whitley, seconded by Jeff Donahoe. And Mr. Whitley, you're up to bat.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We didn't get any comments or amendments on this, and I already spoke to this on Monday night. I'm happy to address any questions or comments that may come up this evening, but otherwise I don't have much else to add, Mr. Moderator.
Neil?
There are no hands raised. Oh, there is Tammy Clay.
Tammy?
Hi, one more time. Tammy Clay, 62 Buckingham Lane. Is that the district at Dunkin' Donuts in 202?
Yes, it is. It's in West Hopkinton. That's correct.
All right, so is this going to have the state highway department with the signals actually put in there before that residential area goes in?
Well, there's nothing proposed there right now. What this does is it just changes the language of the TIF plan so that it's clear that if a developer were to come forward in the future, and there's none that I'm aware of that are planned there, and if they wanted to do a multifamily residential development, it would fall under the TIF plan, and so maybe they could access some of the TIF funds that are available. That's all this does. There's no plan that's been proposed that I'm aware of. So I just want to be clear about that. When the TIF district was created at the 2018 town meeting, the kind of conceptual plan that was put up at town meeting for people to kind of look at was a multifamily plan development, but the language of the TIF plan was a little vague on whether that really qualified to access the TIF funds. And so that's all that we're trying to do here with this article is just clarify that a development like that could potentially tap into those TIF funds.
Okay, I would think that people who are voting would want to know if the state has a plan for lighting to go in that area since it's such a dangerous travel area.
No, I misunderstood your question, Tammy. Yeah, so the select board and the EDC, and that goes for the select board and the EDCs of the town of Henniker, have been in talks with DOT about what that intersection is going to look like if development in this area intensifies. It is part of the 10-year transportation plan. They have not settled on what exactly it's going to be. There is some talk about it being a roundabout. There is some talk about having like a divided highway. I think having an actual signal there would not be a good thing, frankly, because of the volume of traffic that comes in both directions. But that is something that's on the radar of DOT and our town. But again, it's a ways out at this point. And I don't know how COVID may impact that, to be really honest. Hopefully not too much. But that is something that we're all keeping an eye on because we want to make that intersection safer than it is right now.
Yeah, I just traveled there today and it's a mess and the road is a mess because it looks like they're going to repave it somehow.
Yeah.
So it's a mess.
And I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that these two conceptual projects really fit really nicely together. The fact that we've adopted the TIF district for this area and now have changed the underlying zoning to accommodate additional commercial uses and/or this multifamily housing possibility tells the state that we are interested and concerned about this area, and having all of that having taken place has given the state the message that we would like them to prioritize this area further. And they have actually heard that and have in the past year or so have actually bumped up this project on their priority list. So that's all just to say that it's all working very well in tandem together. And this little amendment is just, unfortunately, was perhaps a bit of an oversight in the language of the TIF district. So it's sort of correcting that and making it match with the initial intention of what the vision for the area is.
Okay, that's good.
I think so too.
Thank you, Tammy. Neil?
There are no other hands raised.
Then I will close the discussion of Article 14. We'll move to Article 15. Shall the town raise and appropriate the sum of $120,000 for the purpose of offsetting the cost of collection and disposal of residential solid waste and such other direct costs as budgeted annually, with said funds to come from the pay-by-bag special revenue fund? No funds to be raised by taxation. This motion was made by Sabrina Dunlap, seconded by Anna Wells, and may be addressed by Ms. Dunlap.
I don't have anything else to say on this unless people have questions or comments.
Neil?
There are no, Bonnie Christie.
Yes, Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie Christie, 302 Smithfield. Just wondering what the balance is in the revolving fund right now, in the pay-by-bag fund?
Right, it's not a revolving fund. Just
Right, I misspoke. You're right.
It's a special revenue fund. It is 145, just over 145,000 with the June revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
William Hill.
Mr. Hill? You're on.
Yep, I had to wait for you to turn me on there, sorry. As far as the no cost impact, what do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit better? Where's the 120 coming from?
So Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is this is money already raised by the sale of green bags. Yeah, okay. And this simply allows us to use that money to offset costs of maintaining the transfer station.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Tammy Clay.
Tammy?
I'm sorry to be a pain in the butt, but I understood that, so the green bag sales, but the green bag sales, I think, must be going down with the not required to use the green bags during the COVID thing, and the fact that people are having trash pickup done instead of having to buy the green bags. So I understood that the recycle center was losing money because I'm taking minutes for the budget committee. But how is that going to impact if the green bags are not selling and there's only 100, and nearly said 135 or something so left in the account? So next year it may be even lower, and that may not be a wash this time or next time.
This only appropriates what's in the fund. So the appropriation would be lower next year if there's less money in the fund.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil. You said that better than I would have.
Are there other comments?
See no other hands raised.
Then I will close the discussion of Article 15, move to Article 16. Authorization to expend from Slessor Center Rental Special Revenue Fund. Shall the town raise and appropriate the sum of $1,380 for the purpose of offsetting operational and maintenance costs of the Slessor Center, with said funds to come from the Senior Center Rental Special Revenue Fund? No funds to be raised by taxation. This motion was made by Sabrina Dunlap, seconded by Jeff Donahoe, and Ms. Dunlap, you're up again.
Once again, I don't have anything to say on this.
Do any of the voters have comments?
I see no hands raised.
We'll give them 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. We will close the discussion of Article 16 and move to the last article, Article 17, the New Hampshire Resolution for Fair Districting. Shall the town urge that the New Hampshire General Court, which is obligated to redraw the maps of political districts within the state following the 2020 census will do so in a manner that ensures fair and effective representation of New Hampshire voters. That in order to fulfill this obligation, the New Hampshire General Court shall appoint an independent redistricting commission that draws the new district maps in a way that does not rely on partisan data such as election results or party registration, or favor particular parties or candidates. That motion was made by Ms. Dunlap, seconded by Ms. Wells. Ms. Dunlap, you are the backup.
Yeah. So like I said, Monday, this came in by petition. So this wasn't really ours, but we do support it. And so this is HB 1665, which is a bipartisan bill that passed the House and Senate. And as far as I know, it is not on the governor's desk. And I don't know what the chances are of this being signed, but I do think if we can vote on this and we vote to support it, potentially we could get our name in as another town that supports this, this commission. So, I mean, basically the idea is that this is an independent commission that will help draw fair lines and try to get rid of some of the hugely gerrymandered districts that we have in New Hampshire. And the commission would be made up of 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 5 independents. And there's more information on it, but that's sort of the long and short of it. And I personally think that this is a huge issue for New Hampshire and super important. So I think to the extent we can support it and get our name in as a town that's supporting it, I think that that's a positive thing.
Thank you. Neil?
There are no hands raised.
Then I will close the discussion on Article 17. That brings to a close this information session. Thank all the members, all the voters who have participated in both of the Monday night and tonight's informational meetings. Thank you to the board for your intense contribution to all this, and to Neil specifically for everything that you've done to help put all this together. And again, I thank everybody, both from the school side and the town side, who will make tomorrow morning, I'm sure, a success, and who have worked so hard for both groups to move us along. With that, I will close this meeting and we'll see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you all.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks,
Neil.
Bruce. Thanks, Neil. Thanks,
Bruce, great
everybody.
job.
Yes,
Yes,
thanks, everyone.
thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes,
Good night.
thank you.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Happy
good.
trails, Bruce.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.